Hey, and welcome back to the Art of a Life Well Lived. I'm Christine Regan Lake, and it's good to be here again. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're new to my channel, I would love it if you could like, subscribe, or share. That helps to tweak my algorithm so that my channel can get out to more people, so they can hear the messages that they want and need to hear. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? So today I want to talk to you specifically about emotional invalidation. So, you probably have heard the phrase that people can only meet you as deeply as they have met yourself. So, what is very common for a narcissist is that they are incapable of handling other people's emotions. That's because they can't handle their own. So, if a narcissist can't handle their own sadness, sorrow, depression, anger, things like that, they can't handle yours. So if they can't show up for themselves, they can't show up for you. So what ends up happening is they will, as a result, invalidate you whenever you're having a moment where you're wanting or needing to express how you're feeling when, life situations are overwhelming to you and you're trying to communicate to them. They will shut you down in a number of different ways in terms of basically invalidating your emotional reactions, how you're feeling, things like that, because they basically just can't deal with it. And a lot of times what happens is that if you start experiencing this, and this was kind of what it was for me growing up in our environment, my childhood, both of my parents were children of alcoholics. They weren't alcoholics, but their parents were. And as a result, in our house, you weren't allowed to be anything but happy. If you got sad, you could get in trouble. If you got angry, that was unacceptable. The only allowable emotion that we were kind of allowed to have was put on that happy face, because that's the only thing that's acceptable. So I'm very well aware of what it's like to live in this environment where your emotions are completely invalidated and you are told in a variety of different ways that is so, that your feelings don't matter. Okay, so let me give you 12 very specific statements that are very typical for a narcissist to make, or another individual who's emotionally stunted, who can't handle emotions. So the first one is, you're a strong person, you'll get over it, right? So when someone is in overwhelm and whatever in their life circumstances is assaulting them at that moment, whether it's finances, career, health, family, love, loneliness, whatever, for someone to say to them, you're a strong person, you'll get over it, that is completely invalidating where that person is at that moment. And yes, they probably are a very strong person and they probably will figure out a way to muscle through it. But in that moment, what that person needs is for that narcissist or that person to hold space for them, to allow them to just feel what they are feeling. That is what that phrase, holding space for someone, means. It means you're not going to try to shut down their emotions because you can't handle it. Because most people do that. They try to shut down other people because it makes them very uncomfortable to see somebody who is hurting so much, right? So people think that they're, helping them by saying, oh, you're so strong, you'll get over it. It doesn't help them. All that does is make that person feel even less seen and less heard. So you're a strong person, you'll get over it. Okay, what's another common phrase that is said to someone who is emotionally invalidating you or trying to shut you down? I'm sure it wasn't that bad, you're overreacting. Now they're telling you that your perception is off and that what you think is a big deal and was very upsetting to you is not a big deal. You don't have the proper perspective and you're just being overly emotional and you're blowing things out of proportion, and that you're not seeing things clearly, that you're just totally overreacting. If that's not one of the worst things that you can say to somebody who is, emoting and expressing how they feel, to completely invalidate them and say that how they perceive things is wrong. It doesn't matter if you think it's an overreaction. You think that it's not that big a deal. To this person, it's a big deal and it matters. So the next time someone says to you, I'm sure it wasn't that bad, you're overreacting, learn to come back and say things like, no, I'm not overreacting. This is honestly how I'm feeling. This is how this scenario is playing out. And as a result, this is how I am feeling, and my feelings matter. Okay, whether someone else can validate them does not mean that they matter, that they don't matter, right? Your feelings and what you're experiencing matters tremendously. Unfortunately, many people can't meet you where you're at. They haven't done their own work, so they don't have the capacity to hold that space for you. But please know that your feelings matter and what you are going through matters. Okay, so another common phrase is, you're being too sensitive. This is especially common for a cerebral narcissist, because cerebral narcissists live primarily in their left brain. They're very logical, rational. They're very disconnected from their emotional body. And so for them, anybody who has an emotional reaction is going to appear to be someone who's overreacting, who's being overly sensitive, things like that. So if you're dealing with a cerebral narcissist, you'll know that part of the way that they express, and you'll know that you're dealing with a cerebral narcissist, is because they get all of their feeling of elevation, their grandiosity from their intellectual capacity. This is someone who will think they're smarter than everybody else in the room, that everybody else is beneath them intellectually, things like that. That's a cerebral narcissist. That's a casebook textbook version of a cerebral narcissist. And they'll talk down to you, that you're stupider to them. They'll make comments about your intellect, about, your competence, things like that. A cerebral narcissist has a very grandiose view of them as being intellectually superior to other people. And because they live so much in that intellectual realm, they're very emotionally stunted. They do not know how to express their own emotions. They don't know how to meet people where they're at with their emotions, because it's a path they don't go. They stay in the left brain. Okay, so what's the next one? So number 4 would be, don't take it personal. It's not personal, right? So if something terrible happens to you, right? Someone lies to you, cheats, stabs you in the back at work, or, whatever, and you're really upset by it. Of course it's personal. It happened to you. It's your good name that was smeared. It was whatever. So for somebody to imply to you that it's not personal, don't take it personal, in that moment, that's not going to help you. That doesn't validate how you're feeling. Now, as you move forward and try to release things, can you acknowledge that, people react from their own place? Yes. But when someone is hurting, right? Because the reality is that most people react. They just live their life in triggered reactions. They don't take the time to respond. Their triggers get, flipped, and then they start reacting emotionally. They lash out, whatever, and it is not personal to you. But when someone is hurting and they're going through that, for you to say that to them in that moment when they're truly hurting is insensitive, and it's unkind, and you're not acknowledging how they're feeling. They feel how they feel, right? And at a later moment when they've moved through it, and then they might be able to say, you know what, maybe it is really not personal, whatever. But in that moment, when someone is in a crisis, when you are feeling emotionally overwhelmed, attacked, whatever, it doesn't help for someone to tell you that it's not personal, because in that moment, it is personal for you. It's how you're experiencing it. And what you really need is for someone to just hold space for you. You don't need someone lecturing you and telling you what to do and telling you that how you feel doesn't matter. There will be a time and a space for people to give feedback, but when you're emotionally upset in that moment and you just need to be heard, that is not the time to give that kind of course correction. Okay, so number 5 would be, just let it go. It could be worse, right? So it could be worse. That is trying to tell someone your experience right now doesn't matter, right? Like that. the overwhelm you're feeling. If someone is overwhelmed and at their breaking point, the fact that like it could be worse at some future point doesn't help them. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help them to know that they're being seen and they're being heard. When someone is conveying that level of emotional overwhelm and things like that, how you handle that is that you hold the space and you'll be like, I am so sorry that you are hurting. I know, because the reality is no one can ever know the weight of another man's plate. So what some people may feel is not a big deal is a very big deal to somebody else, because you have no idea what the weight of another man's plate is. You haven't walked in their shoes. You haven't lived through what they're living through. So just let it go. It could be worse. Awful thing to say. That doesn't help anybody. All it's going to do is make you more upset. It's going to make you angry at the person who said that to you, because they're basically telling you that like how you're feeling doesn't matter. Like you're blowing things out of proportion. It could be worse. That person is trying to minimize the trauma or the pain that you are currently experiencing. And it doesn't help you. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help the connection. Okay, so 6, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I know a lot of spiritual people think this is a beautiful thing to say. It is not helpful to say to someone, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, when someone is on their knees at their breaking point. It doesn't help them. All that's telling you is that, like, you know, God knows you can handle this, so just keep bearing it and whatever. You know, when someone is in a peak moment of emotional trauma and breakdown, they're clearly at that point where, you know, they don't think they can handle it anymore. And you telling them that, you know, it's appropriate for you to have this weight on your back is insensitive. It's unkind. It's not being present with that person. When someone feels they can't take the weight of it anymore, what they need is for you to give them either a physical hug, an emotional hug. It's to hear them and to say, I see you, I hear you, I honor where you're at, and I can't know what it must be like for you because I'm not in your shoes, and you know, things like that. Whenever someone, a narcissist or anyone else, anyone who hasn't done their emotional work, tries to shut down and minimize how you're feeling, all it does is make the person on the other end, make that person who is in emotional overwhelm, all it does is make them feel even less heard, less seen, and it makes them feel even more isolated, because someone is not saying to them, I understand, like, I feel you, I hear you, I see you, like, I honor exactly where you're at, and I'm not going to try to tell you that you shouldn't be feeling how you're feeling, or that, you know, anything else like that. It's just all about being present with that person and holding the space for them. Okay, another very detrimental thing that a lot of well-meaning people say, and narcissists may say it as well, is everything happens for a reason. That's not true. Everything doesn't happen for a reason. Bad things happen to good people, and traumatic, horrifying things happen to people. A friend I went to high school with just recently lost her 12-year-old son. It is the most horrific thing as a mother that I could ever even imagine. And she reached out to me, and we were on a phone conversation, and we were talking, and, you know, all I just kept saying was, I can't even imagine how devastating this must be for you. And, you know, I would never, ever think to say to her, everything happens for a reason. There's a reason your 12-year-old son dies. Horrific, right? That is a terrible thing to say to someone who is in crisis, who is in emotional trauma. And at the end of the conversation with my girlfriend, I said to her, I don't know if anything I said on this call was the right thing to say to you, because honestly, I just cannot even wrap my brain around what this must be like for you. Like, I was completely honoring her where she was at, and to say, I can't even imagine how painful it is. I see you, I feel you, you know, whatever. But I would never say to her, everything happens for a reason, or God doesn't give you more than you can handle. You know, how could that possibly help someone and make them make them feel that they are being seen and heard? You know what I mean? So if someone is saying that to you, everything happens for a reason, that's just, there's these catchphrases that like go around in society and people think are helpful, and they're not helpful. They could be incredibly harmful. And so anyway, just didn't mean to go off on that rant. Okay. Number 8, I know exactly how you feel, right? No, they don't. No one's walked in your shoes. People can empathize and have an idea of what it was like for you, but for someone to, it kind of almost comes off really condescending. I know exactly how you feel. You don't, right? As much as anybody may feel like they've gone through something similar, you don't know exactly how someone feels. And for someone to say that, it can come off really condescending. And so that's just another way that you can have your feelings invalidated. Okay, so number 9, you shouldn't be angry. I'm sure they didn't mean it, right? So now, again, this is someone telling you to shut down how you're feeling. You shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't be angry. You know, they're basically saying how you interpret it and what's going on, you shouldn't be angry. They don't have a right to tell you if you're angry, and how you feel is how you feel. Whether the person did or didn't mean it, whatever, it doesn't matter. How you feel is how you feel, and it's not up to somebody else to tell you how you do and don't feel, you know, and that, you know, and interpret it for you, right? You're the one who's living through it. Number 10, don't be sad. You have so much to be grateful for. So, yes, is there usually always something that we can strive to be grateful for? Yes. But when someone is hurting, when someone is in the darkness, telling them not to be sad and all the things that they should be grateful for doesn't help. People who are hurting need to be seen exactly as they are. They don't need judgments from other people telling them that they should or shouldn't be doing this, they should or shouldn't be sad or, you know, sorrowful, this, that, whatever else. And I'm sure they are grateful. And I'll tell you, there have been, throughout the last 10 years, you know, yes, you can be appreciating and grateful for all the blessings that you have. And there are also moments where people drop into fear, they drop into sadness, they drop into despair, loneliness. They've even proven that loneliness is more dangerous for your health than smoking cigarettes. So for someone to say to you that, you know, don't be sad, you have so much to be grateful for, that doesn't help the person, right? That's not helping you. That doesn't make you feel seen and heard, and to know that like what you're going through is honored and someone's not trying to shut you down. Okay, now number 11, you make such a big deal out of everything, right? Again, this is a way of someone communicating to you that what you're feeling, you're blowing things out of proportion. They're minimizing what you are going through. More than likely, they are minimizing this because they can't deal with their own, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help you in that moment to know that it's because they can't meet themselves. The reality is that everyone's emotions are valid. They feel how they feel. Why they feel the way they feel, how they're interpreted it, of course, it's all going to vary based upon their traumatic life experiences, how much healing work, whatever. But if you love someone and they are hurting, then you don't want to minimize their pain and invalidate what they're going through, to invalidate their feelings and their emotions. And the last one is, that didn't happen, you're making things up. This dips into the typical trait of the narcissist, which is gaslighting, right? Trying to tell you that, you know, you're making things up and that, you know, it didn't happen that way, things like that. So that's definitely borderline. That's for sure beyond just emotional invalidation. That's actually pure like gaslighting and lying, right? So those are the 12 things that I wanted to share with you about how people can invalidate your emotions. And like I said, usually the reason they do this is because they can't deal with their own emotions, so they can't deal with yours. People can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. But knowing that doesn't help in the moment, right? Because when you're hurting, and you don't want to have your emotions and your feelings invalidated, because every emotion and feeling that you have is worthy of being acknowledged, right? Because it's who you are, it's your life experience, right? So I'll just recap them really quickly for you again. So the 12 statements are: you're a strong person, you'll get over it. Basically trying to minimize the experience for you, and that, you'll be able to soldier through it, right? I'm sure it wasn't that bad. You're overreacting. Again, minimizing, not honoring where you're at. You're being too sensitive, right? This basically implies that your emotional experience, you being an emotional being, is a bad thing. Having emotions is part of what makes us human. Okay, number 4, don't take it personal. It's not personal. When you're going through an emotionally traumatic experience and you're in that peak emotional state, having someone tell you that it wasn't personal is just invalidating where you're at. At a future point, when you're not triggered, you can have a dialogue about whether something is or isn't personal, but when it's not personal. But if in that moment, you want to make sure that you are holding space for that person and honoring where they're at. Number 5, just let it go. It could be worse. Right? Yeah, that's really going to help you feel better, right? Just let it go. It could be worse. 6, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. Totally unproductive thing to say to someone who's in the height of trauma and crisis. Everything happens for a reason. Again, highly destructive, highly unhelpful when someone is in a peak state of crisis or emotional trauma. Number 8, I know exactly how you feel. It's kind of this condescending, they're trying to imply they know exactly how you feel. No one knows exactly how you feel because no one's living in your body right now. But it's a triggered reaction. It's not good, not helpful. Number 9, you shouldn't be angry. I'm sure they didn't mean it. Again, diminishing how you're feeling, trying to say that you're blowing things out of proportion. 10, don't be sad. You have so much to be grateful for, right? Invalidating your feelings, telling you that you should focus on everything that you're grateful for, and instead of allowing to hold the space for you so that you can feel how you feel. Number 11, you make such a big deal out of everything. Again, minimizing your emotional feelings. Who we are and how we feel is a part of our experience, and it's important for the people in our sphere of influence to honor where we're at and not to try to minimize what you were going through. And number 12, that didn't happen. You're making things up. This is the statement that starts bordering and going into gaslighting, which is basically telling you that you're experiencing something that's not true, or they're lying, things like that. Okay, so those were the 12 statements that I wanted to share with you with regard to how a narcissist or an emotionally unavailable person will invalidate your emotions and your feelings. So I hope you found value in that. Have a beautiful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.